Lizanne, if the Fed doesn't change rates at all throughout 2020, where do you stand on the S&P 500 forecast for the end of next year?
Well, I think if the economic environment justifies that and we stay in sort of a steady state of growth without an uptick in inflation, that's not a bad thing. Mike talked about how the market has done a month after the Fed announces a pause or doesn't do anything is actually the best of the other two scenarios included. And I think if you look at three rate cuts in the past when we've gotten there, the further the Fed goes from the third rate cut, if they continue to cut, it's usually because we're entering into or they're trying to combat a recession. That's obviously not good for the stock market. So a Fed that doesn't have much more to go on the downside in terms of cutting and sort of stands pat, history suggests that's not a bad environment for the market.
Josh, what do you make about where we are sitting going into year end after we had that scare at the end of December last year? Any chance we see something like that again?
Still possible, but the winners of that scare were the people who didn't notice it. Maybe they hadn't logged into their brokerage account for a week or so. They did okay. Lizanne, I'm curious what your thoughts are about the dollar. A lot of people are talking about this uptrend that it's been in really all year long, and now it appears to be at the lower end of that trend channel. Is there something important to consider if, in fact, the dollar technically breaks down? What might the impact be on things like earnings or sentiment? How do you think about that?
Well, I think if it were to break down outside of the range that I think is embedded into things like earnings forecasts looking ahead, particularly for exporters, I think that would probably be a benefit to S&P earnings. Of course, there are a lot of other uncertainties that I think have put the analyst community in a state of uncertainty, not least being the December 15th tariff. So I think the dollar piece of it may add some clarity for the manufacturers, for the export-oriented companies, but it doesn't necessarily solve the uncertainty with regard to the near-term trajectory for tariffs and the impact that that's going to have. Maybe not as much on profits themselves, but profit margins.